Well, welcome to Dave's Car Part 3. In this final section, there's going to cover the car engine and the modifications and the differential transmission and so on. And the miscellaneous sections, some shop photos and equipment and people involved. And then coming out photo section where first drive, first time out in the sunlight, car shows, Long Beach Grand Prix and a story from that. And finally, after quite a number of years, when I sold the car and saying goodbye kind of thing, as it's readied and then carried off back to a new owner in Michigan. Minnesota. Okay, so the engine is a Chevy Corvair, which is a flat six-cylinder air-cooled engine, and I liked it because it's like a miniature version of the Porsche 917, which is also a pancake air-cooled central fan kind of engine. And they had a turbocharged model in 1966 to 1969, 180 horsepower. And then they had a carbureted version, 140 horsepower, with 4 carburetors, bigger valves. And so I combined these two. And for the turbocharger, I bought a higher scroll housing, exhaust housing, which is kind of like your supercharger or turbocharger. And it gives it higher performance. So I also decided to make my own intake manifolds. I had some ideas on how that could be done to maybe make a performance improvement. And so the basic engine's torn down, blueprinted, had everything balanced at a balance shop. And where the cylinders on a Corvair are a cast iron cylinder, and you see these 4 special steel rods go out to the side. There's 4 of those hold each cylinder in place. Well, where they go through the slots, the standard cylinder is notched out, which can get some distortion on heating and cooling. So the cylinders I replaced it for had a cast aluminum lug on a steel. There they go. And you'll see there's a drilled hole through there where these 4 lockdown studs hold it together. So, and there's some special pistons and it's kind of a high performance Corvair piston cylinder set. And you'll think you can see inside the crankshaft that it's been polished up. And this is starting to assemble and find out where top dead center is. Now this is the bottom of the engine, the oil pickup. And one thing that Chevrolet Corvairs were known to on hard cornering is oil would slosh to the side and go up the little pushrod tubes and run out of the oil pan. So you'll see in these pictures I made some baffles so that when you're cornering hard, it just keeps it in the oil pan so you don't lose oil pressure. So this is the cylinder heads. I'm kind of smoothing out the passages. And this is called CCing the cylinder heads, where you put a plastic disc and seal with Vaseline and see exactly what the volume of each chamber is. And then you find the largest one and make the others all that size. And it's removing the valves. Of course, you had new valves, higher quality valves, and shims to get each spring height the same. So this is just the bottom side of the engine, and these are the standard Chevrolet hydraulic pushrod engine. And its heads are now on. That's the bottom section where the exhaust comes out. And the top, there's an air breather, and I just filled that full of, it's called Chore Girl cleaning pads, or just a non-soap bronze fibrous pad, and by filling that up, the oil collects on that and it doesn't go out the vent tube. And the oil pump, it was an oversized oil pump gears and a little higher spring pressure, so I'll give it a little more oil pressure. That's the cooling fan on the top of the engine, and this is the control shroud that ducts the air down over the cylinder smoothly. That's the bottom of the engine. And the exhaust manifolds are going on. And I'm wrapping it with believe it or not, asbestos to keep from conducting that heat back to the engine. So these are just some of the parts. There's a little temperature controlled door, so it keeps the heat in the engine when it's cold, and see the little vent doors are open now when it warms up. So that was standard Chevy Corvair parts. And this is changing some of the baffles for directing the airflow. And that's looking in under the shroud to see the spark plugs. And this is a special tool for pushing the input shaft bushing in the end of the crankshaft. Normally you just hammer those in, but this is where you can push it in without putting a strain on the thrust bearing in the crankshaft. This is light and flywheel. So I've cut the material off the outside so it has less inertial mass for quicker acceleration. And I ended up in my later business rebuilding about 7,000 of those flywheels for Chevrolet Corvairs, bolting them together instead of rivets. So that's what happened after they couldn't build cars. They went into a car parts business. So this is a special clutch disc. Is going to put more torque into the engine. So this is called a Velvetouch lining. And it's lining they use in high-performance brakes and logging truck brake clutches and so on. And they don't, when it slips, it gets hot, and then it has greater friction, so it's got more torque it can handle. This is a special tool I made. It's a remote control distributor. So that's a ball bearing guide, hydraulic cylinder, and I use that for measuring the ideal timing needed for each RPM. So this is the oil-cooled oil pan, and you'll see I talked about water-cooled oil. So this is where the oil is filled in this area. So I just bang water tubes. I can pump water through there. These are the fins going on. There's a section going to go inside. And there's the oil pan on the bottom. And that's the oil cavity, which is, this is setting so that's on the oil pan itself. And now that'll be turned and goes onto the bottom of the engine. Okay, we're looking at the Transaxle, and it's Corvair Transaxle. It actually, in the transmission, actually used Corvette gears, so it was very sturdy in that part. And the differential in the middle is kind of a weak point. It had a 2 spider gear carrier housing, and there was one available that had a 4 spider carrier. It was all machined from billet steel, so I bought one of those. You see the 4 spider gears there, and a new ring and pinion that had a higher ratio, so for better acceleration. So when all is said and done, top speed was geared at 135 miles an hour. That was 6,000 RPM. So I was interested in having plenty of torque in the actual driving range that we all inhabit for a street car. So this is assembling the carrier. You see the 4 spider gears there, and the machine steel housing. And it's also limited slip, which was kind of nice because that wasn't standard on Chevrolet Transaxle. So it ended up with a limited slip 4 spider differential and a better clutch with the Okay, now this is the intake manifold design I came up with. I call it a Swirl Flow. So the idea was the air would come in on the tangent in the center, and it would swirl down, then go down in the engine. So it's my own design, and I built the center manifold, and it goes out, and there's a center manifold here. There it is with the first entrance curve, and these are holes that I'm going to put water tubes through there. These are copper water tubes, and I'm going to braze each of those in place to seal it. So the fuel air coming in swirls, and it goes through these tubes, and it takes the heat that the turbochargers put into the air to cool it down so you have a denser charge. So it's a good idea, and it's modern high-performance turbocharged cars use something similar to that. So this is in place on the engine. You can see the little manifold on each side goes to 2 openings on each cylinder head. This is the air goes in, goes out to each end, goes down to the little port, swirls again, and then goes right down into the cylinder. And then these were capped with a water tank on the outside, so I could plumb it and pump water through it with a little electric water pump. And that's just controlled from the dash. Okay, so the alternator, and it's a heavy-duty alternator, so you have plenty of torque. So this is the turbocharger, the exhaust fitting, and it has a remote oil filter. So this is a standard V8 type size oil filter. And this is the central unit that holds the piping for the oil filter. Now the engine's being fitted and mounted, trying to get everything so it fits, lines up. And to start with, I used 2 SU carburetors that were recalibrated, and later that was replaced by a 4-barrel American, I think it was, I can't remember the brand now, 4-barrel carburetor had small intakes and large secondaries. So when you rebuild the engine, this is going through the starter, you know, get everything up to good operating condition. And this is the top of the cooling fan. And this is going to be a tensioning mechanism to tension the fan belt tension. Okay, this is an adapter that Heliarc welded some fittings in, and that'll be for the remote oil filter. Turbocharger. It's a Ray J turbocharger, was with this factory brand, and like I said, modified. So, and the 2 SU carburetors also had a custom-made manifold. So I just made it out of aluminum plate and bent it, and then Heliarc welded it together. So these are the runners, where it combines the 2 carburetors into a central outflow. This clamping down, you know, this nice aluminum Heliarc welds are kind of pretty to see. Okay, so I'm kind of grinding out, making the inside surfaces smooth, you know, no sharp edges. And that's the plate on the back of the carburetors, and this is the coupler that changes from the square flow to a round flow. The factory exhaust pipes for the turbocharger, and they're painted white here, so you can see the coming up the turbocharger, coming around in, and it goes out the back to the exhaust. So now these are some of the engine in place pictures. And it's like everything, you know, you end up doing all the connections, and you have to have a throttle that you can operate, so you have a long throttle cable. Now this is with the muffler. This is left is the, in this case, the right one, the big oval-shaped one's the one used for the turbocharger. So for moving the engine and transaxle around, there's just a 4-armed bracket that just bolts onto the engine, and then so it's an easy way to lift. And the Corvair engine's kind of nice. It's 325 pounds, and with the transaxle, I think it's 475, I think, or 500 and a quarter, which is a relatively light power plant transmission. Okay, so these are just this is the test engine that I had in the chassis for a while. I was working on the frame and doing some of the wiring. So that comes out, and then, of course, it'll be replaced with a new engine. Now, this is sort of interesting part in the middle. See, there's a aluminum bell housing. So if you have a rear-engine car and you turn the engine so it's mid-engine, all of a sudden you have 4 speeds reverse and 1 speed forward. So to take care of that, you cut the bell housing in half in a special fixture, rotate it 180 degrees, and then re-weld it. So now the transaxle runs upside down, which is okay because it's kind of a splash oil system anyway. but it puts the output shafts at exactly the right height for the rear tires. So it was kind of worked out good in two directions. So I needed a special engine stand working on the Corvair engine, so I just took some old pipe. These are two friends, Gary and Bruce. And this is a portable crane I made for moving parts. Here I am working on a flywheel, an old air compressor, big work table for laying out sheet metal, fan for taking the fumes out when you're painting, some shelving, build yourself a shelf, and this is kind of a drill press special clamp. It's a cam clamp, and at the community college where I took a project class for 3 years making all little supplemental parts, and they had a clamp like this, so I made my own version. There I am sewing something. I don't know what it is. Oxyacetylene welder for brazing. It needed a cart, so just welded some pieces together, soapbox derby wheels, and I still use that. Reading a book on turbocharging. My wife studying her college textbooks. And these are just a little metal bending tool. My brother Paul. And there I am relaxing again in one of those faint moments. So these are the kind of getting ready to take it outside photos. So first time it's been out on the street, and going to take it for its first drive. So I thought I'd better take a couple of pictures of it before I started, just in case it didn't get back in one piece. And notice from some angles, it looks better than from other angles. It's like a lot of cars, I suppose, are that way. There's certain angles or views are more attractive than others. So the back of the car is just 37 inches high. And under you can see the back frame, and these are the racing headlights and the standard high-low beams and the cooling radiators. Okay, the view from the top is really quite attractive. And I apparently also did a color shoot. Got some color film and did the same thing. The reason I chose this is like sunflower yellow Volkswagen Porsche color, strictly for safety reasons. People could see you. And I thought when you got a low car like that, you better make it visible. Okay, there's the car with the model again. That's the way it looks when you open up the body and the forward and back. So it's kind of a show interest when you can see the chassis and the brakes and all the suspension and everything just opens up. And my wife reading a road map. And this is my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and wife and myself. Standing on a ladder. And you notice the upholstery is not put in at this point. Okay, the engine compartment. Model opened up. And my wife and I. And the fuel tanks are on the side. So this is the first actual drive. My wife's taking the pictures. So just up and down the street. So that's the first drive. And right away we went to a, well, and this is a little out of place, but these are from the, okay, this is the Roadster show in Portland, and we just took it on a trailer up to Portland for the first, it's kind of Portland Roadster show. And then this is driving the country, out visiting. Kind of see what it looks like out on the street. And you get invited to little mall shows. This is a World of Wheels car shows. And I go ahead and took some pictures here because so you're able to take everything off and really have a display. So just 2 bolts, the fenders, the front hood and the back hood come off, and so people can really, you're not just looking at the outside of a car, you're looking at the inside of the car. And these are the tires. I stacked them up as the corner markers. So in this case, these are street legal Goodyear tires with widened Corvette wheels. So they're heavy. I think a rear wheel and tire weighs 80 pounds. So to improve the performance on this car, they say the most important things to do is have a lightweight wheel and tire, because you don't have to accelerate all that mass every time you accelerate or brake. So that would be a quick way to even make the performance better, just lightweight wheels and tires. So at the show, this truck was a wheel-standing double V12 Allison truck, and they gave a Best Engineering Award at that World of Wheels show. And they gave it to this car instead of the big truck. So, and this is kind of a Chevy Corvair convention display. And this is at Forest Grove Concours. It's one of the big name car concours in Oregon. And this is it's time, years have gone by, and it's now I think 2006, and I've decided to sell the car because we needed money for a remodel our living room, and I found someone that was willing to buy it for $10,000, and it just was exactly what he was looking for. So we decided to go ahead and sell it, and this is the last day. We're getting it ready for the transport truck to come. So that's what it looked like on its last day at our house. And here's the transport truck, helping him load it up. Drove it up there. And he's heading off to Minnesota and around the corner. So this is what we turned the money from the sale of the car into: a remodeled living room, elevated ceiling, hardwood floor and ceiling, beautiful fireplace, love seat. So it was kind of bittersweet, but it was time to find a new owner. So that's my my car construction adventure story. So what it amounted to, I ended up working for 6,000 hours for free. But out of it, I gained a lot of experience, and it was I learned a lot, and you hone some skills, and you kind of test yourself a little bit. Now, the rest of the story, I wanted to build cars for a living. So when the car was finished, and I went ahead and contacted the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C., and said, "Hello, it's Dell Manufacturing. We're starting a new car company. Is there anything I need to do to notify you?" And the Department of Transportation was Neil Goldschmidt under Jimmy Carter. He wrote a nice letter back. He said, "Congratulations on your new car company." He said, "You have to give us 3 cars to crash test. And also you're going to have to meet all the pollution control standards and crash control standards of any Ford or Chevrolet or Dodge. And he said, sorry, but when they wrote the law, they didn't allow any exemption for startup companies. So that was kind of the end of my Dale Manufacturing car building dreams. And instead I went into rebuilding car parts for, now I'm 72, and ever since then, that's what I've been doing. So thanks for listening, and I hope you got some enjoyment.